Mariano Fortuny's full name was Mariano Fortuny y Madrazo, and although he was Spanish, he lived most of his life in Venice. He's known in many different worlds, in fashion and theater, in design, in textiles, and in fine art, but it's his interest in innovation that unifies all of the different things he did. He grew up in a family immersed in the arts with many interesting ancestors. His mother, Cecilia de Madrazo, came from a family of artists and hosted regular salons in their home where Marcel Proust was a regular. She was a pianist, she was an avid collector of antique textiles, and her father and grandfather were the first two directors of the Prado Museum. Fortuny's father, Mariano Fortuny y Marzal, was an important and accomplished Spanish artist known for his mastery of representing the effects of light, which is a skill and an interest that his son inherited. Fortuny y Marzal traveled extensively and returned with all manner of exotic wares, so Mariano Fortuny was born into an environment perfectly suited to inspire artistic innovation. This is a picture of his father's studio, which gives you a sense of the things he had around him as a child. Fortuny was only 3 when his father died, and his mother moved the family to Paris, and then 17 years later to Venice, to the Palazzo Martignano, where her salons continued with a whole new crew of Venetian artists. The Italian aesthete and poet Gabriele D'Annunzio was one of her regulars. Because Fortuny remained in Venice, and his work is infused with a sort of Venetian sensibility, he's generally considered an Italian artist in spite of the rich Spanish history of his family. In 1898, Fortuny moved into the top floor of a 15th century building and spent the rest of his life acquiring and restoring the rest of the building, which had been divided into many small apartments. The first chapter in Fortuny's professional life is relatively conventional. He started out as a painter. At the end of the 1890s, he started exhibiting his paintings, first in Munich and then in Venice and then in Paris. To investigate and celebrate his interest in Wagner's work, he painted a set of 46 Wagnerian mythologies, including this Flower Maidens from Parsifal. In 1899, he designed sets for a theatrical production in São Paulo, which led to work on costumes and sets for a production of Wagner's Tristan and Isolde at La Scala in 1900. Working on this project helped Fortuny realize that theater lighting, available in 1900, didn't do much to advance Wagner's goal of a unified art in theater. At the time, lighting was either still candle footlights or very harsh electrical lighting that was hard to control and didn't do much to add atmosphere. Fortuny began experimenting to create adjustable lighting effects that could change to match the changing moods and locations presented on stage. He discovered that reflected light is more controllable than direct light, and developed a system which he patented in 1901. Arc lighting had been used since the 1870s, but it's a very harsh form of light, and by reflecting arc light off of surfaces that were coated with a emery powder, Fortuny was able to produce an even and kinder sort of indirect light. His 1904 treatise, Éclairage scénique, or stage lighting, describes the discovery that formed the basis of his indirect lighting technique. And he wrote, "It is not the quantity, but the quality of light that makes things visible and allows the pupil to open properly." In 1902, he arrived at a radical proposal for a stage intervention, which would allow these lighting advances to be rescaled and change how electricity illuminated stage scenery. This is a model in his Paris studio of the Fortuny Dome. The full name is the Fortuny Cyclorama Dome, and it's a hugely scaled-up light reflector. It allowed lighting effects and also the illusion of greater space than would actually have fit on a stage. The patent is from 1906, but it's something that he developed in 1902. It's kind of a crazy idea, and yet it worked in a brilliant and novel way. The patent language describes it this way. A concave background is formed by exhausting the airspace between 2 sheets of fabric, the inner of which is attached at its edges to a curved framework, the outer being attached to a framework. Air is exhausted by a fan. So a fan was used to move air into and out of the space between 2 layers of fabric which were attached to the framework of the dome, and that allowed it to collapse in 90 seconds, so very fast stage transformation. And the largest that he installed was at La Scala in Milan in 1922. So that's a 20-year gestation period to perfect the technology. And the patent drawing shows not only the fabric and the layers between, but also the fan mechanism. As Fortuny began adapting the dome to use in different theaters, he arrived at a variety of scales and mechanisms. On the right are some models he made, and on the left it shows a cutaway of a theater with the dome installed in the pre-existing space. So he was also trying to work with what theaters had, but create a more modern stage effect. Once Fortuny figured out even reflected light and huge fabric dome surfaces, he continued to develop new mechanical proposals to affect the quality and the quantity of light for stage production. This drawing shows the next phase, which is bouncing light off of an advancing strip of colored fabric to change the lighting hue and the feeling of the reflected light. So as the roller moves and the color on the fabric changes, the light being bounced off of that would also change and be transferred to the whole surface of the dome. Fortuny made this functioning electric demonstration model to show the dramatic changes achievable with the dome and the lighting system. So with just one set, endless moods and atmospheres could be achieved through lighting. That's a more effective way to think about mounting a complicated staging or a complicated piece of theater, which would have involved lots of sets. In this program, you just have one set or two sets and lots of lighting effects. Fortuny filed many patents and produced an entire album full of theater drawings with different ideas to further his investigations into stage sets and lighting. He had lots of patents, and interestingly, he filed patents globally. There are patents filed in Italy, in France, in England, and in America for his different innovations.